Welcome to Jodi Hayes Asking Visual Questions. This is a project I've thought about for a long time, not directly thinking about a podcast, but the way that the way that like friends around me see art and see a life in art making and see museum exhibitions, and the way that we approach all of it is through generally asking questions and being curious. And that has also been my New Year's resolution, maybe for the last 10 years, is to ask more questions. So, a couple of questions that I will ask of either the format will be I've interviewed artists artist is a very loose term, but mostly visual artist. And I ask them two questions. If one is going to be, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't spending a lot of time making art? Because just because we're making a lot of time making art doesn't mean we are also not enjoying a full life of doing other things as well. It's part of what enriches a practice. It's I think those kinds of things are often seen in like more dominant narratives on art making and in institutions and educational, like professorial roles. Those are seen as suspect, but I really think that's where a lot of the richness of one's work comes from. So there's that, the first question, kind of a way to ask, like, were there other things that you wanted to do that you didn't pursue, or are you still pursuing those? And are you, you know, that kind of thing. So that's one I've always asked. And this other one I've actually used as a secret barometer on if I want to work with someone in whatever way, whether it's like through them being a gallerist or a supervisor or an artist that I host, curating their work. Um, it's, have you ever thought about quitting making art? And I've heard many answers to this. What brought this question up for me mostly was having heard someone say, an artist say that if you had ever thought about not making art, like if you had ever thought about quitting, to put it a different way, then you're not, possibly you're not supposed to be doing art in the first place. So I categorically disagree with that. I think there's a lot of privilege to unpack in thinking that if you've had this resolute focus on being a visual artist in the world, like a lot of that is, wow, like a really privileged vantage point that many of us don't have or haven't had always had. Some of us do now, but that's going to be my second question. If you've ever thought about quitting altogether, and if so, what did that look like for you? So these are going to be under 30 minutes because ain't nobody got time for more. But I also think it makes for a really pointed conversation. So this intro will be even shorter, but to model kind of the two questions I'm going to present to thinkers, people I love, people I think other people should know more about, people who are underrepresented, underestimated, and some people who aren't, who are, mid-career and more than that, and just busy enough to where I've never had a good reason to like reach out to them and ask some things. So you'll enjoy that. And I'll have a list of those guests soon. So for the first question for me, what would I do if I wasn't an artist? I mean, my dad kind of prodded to me maybe in like high school that I could be an attorney. That was never a path that was appealing to me. I don't know. I think like the more and more entrenched in being in the studio full time, which I am now, I do some part time teaching because I do love it. But it really, right now, most needful is my studio work. And I don't know, maybe I would probably be teaching full time. I used to say I would be a poet, but I am so horrible. And once in terms of like writing poetry, which I made a lot of poems in college and they're horrible. So I'm grateful that many of those notebooks have been thrown away. But what I kind of have arrived on is that I'm a reader. So maybe I would be an editor or a writer or a professional reader in that way if I weren't making visual art. I do say that I make art for readers. And if you are a reader, you understand that. Even though my work is visual, there's like layered research and a lot of language like knitted into how I think about making an object or making a thing that we see and first apprehend with our eyes. So maybe all of those things. I'm a mother of 3 children, and that is not something I ever expected to be. And it's really, I do most days find it full and hard and good. But maybe I would be like, I would use this mammoth bank of logistical knowledge. It's definitely used in service to my studio, getting work out on time and managing all these different projects at once. But I might be like, I don't know, might work at UPS or something for logistics and planning. So that's it. When I was like in second grade, I thought I'd be a cheerleader. So perhaps in some ways, this podcast effort is a little bit of that. The second question is have I ever thought about quitting? And the answer for me is like most definitely so. And that it shouldn't, I think, be a commentary on like how committed I am to my practice. It's that it's just so hard when you are making work and you, like me, perhaps haven't come to making your work through like a well-worn path, whether it's through parents who attended museums or parents who were on boards of museums or friends who studied art or friends who had art lessons growing up. I did have those because my mom was an art teacher. There's just a lot that there's a richness that I grew up with. And that included the richness of a small town and a rural space and like all of the community that kind of rallies around that. There was also kind of this it became embedded in me sense of like, what am I missing? And that came from a lot of things. It came from like watching TV and seeing like, oh, wow, like none of these shows, even if they're like supposed to be in the South, none of them are shot in the South. I kind of didn't know exactly what was missing, but I knew that there was like a thing that was happening outside of where I was. So whether that was true or not, it began to inform like where I chose to go to school and all that kind of stuff. So many of us don't have that. We like grow up in New York City or we grow up around Columbia's campus, or a lot of my dear friends have that path, and what that does implicitly, I think, is like create a system where you see people embedded in making art and art making and world building through art making, and it becomes a path that you don't question so much. If you don't have those models, it takes an immense amount of strength and courage and scrappiness and fortitude and research to make this work and to continue without questioning it. So I applaud all of you who are out there and have said, yeah, I can't do this anymore. The most intense one time it happened for me in undergraduate. One also should know that I have a history of anxiety. So now we're a lot more able to contextualize those things. But I also had a lot of things to make me anxious in college. I was trying to go to SVA, and it was an amazing choice, but they were also being sued by a Southern art school for conspiracy to take them over. So I had I thought it was a stalker, but it was actually like a private investigator following me. And I was a sophomore in college. I also was really intent on making good grades and doing well, and for the sake of my parents and the scholarship that I'd gotten. So financially, there were a lot of those burdens. I also just wanted to lap up everything I could about the world of art, the history of art, which wasn't in and around me. It wasn't until I was a senior in high school that I remember going to a legit big museum. It was the Fort Worth Art Museum. And I saw the Barnes collection. So it takes a lot to do what we do. And because of those stresses, halfway through college, I thought, I don't know, I can do other things. I can write, I can, maybe I want to study film. So that did prompt a move from SVA to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, where I transferred and continued to study art. But I did let myself kind of believe when transferring that maybe art wasn't the path. And I think kind of opening that possibility up has always been helpful for me to kind of let some of the pressure off. And the second most notable time was after I had my third child. I had 3 kids in 5 years. I left academia. I had a full-time academic job for about 5 years after I had my first son. The leaving was, I didn't think it would be as resolute as it's kind of become in terms of full-time academic pursuit, but I needed to be home. My partner travels full-time, and I was looking at this middle-class lens of like, you don't pay for a nanny. So I was home. I've been home with the kids for a while, and what that opened up was like a deep connection to a studio practice and all of that connection with galleries and museums and showing, all of that part of my career, which I really love. But I did, after I had while I was carrying my third kid, after my second, things were kind of like moving a bit in my career again. I didn't like stand still after having my second, but I think I underestimated the art world's ability to see when a woman can make her work and have children and have a life of making that includes all of those things, and that doesn't water it down, doesn't mean you're not working. I think I just like underestimated how entrenched some of those like masochistic things are. So yeah, insert laughing. Yeah, I believed in a meritocracy until I was probably at that time, so I began to think through like what it would make. It was costing a lot, maybe financially, but just like psychically to be in this city. Nashville at that point wasn't what it is now, but a lot of my art peers were on the coast, mostly in New York, and feeling outside of a system. And right when I was getting going again, I was pregnant again, and definitely wanted to pursue like a large family, but didn't know how to make it out to the other side with my family and also have my like positive lens intact. So what I decided, I was didn't tell anyone about this. It was about a year long kind of thinking through what it would mean not to make art anymore. So I was 40, 39, 40. This is like 2015. So I decided I would like fulfill a lot of my obligations that were already happening, already in, the momentum was around them, including starting a Dadu, which is like a pop-up gallery in my studio here in Tennessee. So I was going to do all that, but I just kind of gave myself the out to say, if this is too much psychically, emotionally, it's hard. People were, I had to like put on my blinders and tell myself like not to be jealous, or to be jealous, but only tell a couple people, all of those things that like ambitious people we have to deal with. I came out on the other side deciding I would make work. I would make it not a burden on me and myself or my family. I kind of I was like, okay, I can make these very modestly scaled a la Tom Niskowski, like 12 by 16 paintings. So I started making those, and then things just opened up. I started making larger work. I worked with Red Arrow for about 5 years. Now I'm working with David Lusk. But all that to say, like that was a very real investigation that lasted over a year of, should I be doing this? This is really hard. So for those of you who have a lot of cheerleaders around you and have always had that, I love it for you. But a lot of us haven't had that. It makes me really appreciative for the ones that I have now. So, welcome again to Visual Questions. I look forward to getting to share some of my most favorite people in the world and how they answer these questions.